Hey, what's happening, you guys? Welcome to the Proclivity podcast. I am your host. I'm here and joined by my co-host, Coach Emily. Coach, how you doing today?
Hello. I'm doing so well.
Best day ever?
Of course.
Of course, it's the best day ever. And we're really excited today on the show because we're talking about stuff that's super near and dear to our heart, right? We focus on metabolic flexibility. And I over the last year, have really worked and gone into intermittent fasting, time constricted feeding windows, long fasts, all that kind of jazz. And today, we have an expert in the field. We're going to be talking about some intermittent fasting, some metabolic flexibility. So always super excited to talk about that. So before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors, 8 Sleep and Fatco.
Fatco. Yes. Fatco. Skincare brand. The best, cleanest option in terms of ingredients and quality.
They're great. Check them out. You can go Fatco. We got a discount, right? Proclivity.
Mm-hmm.
Check it
Yep.
out,
Use
guys.
code Proclivity.
Check it out. Check it out. All right. Without further ado, let's bring on our guest today. Brian Gryn is an intermittent fasting expert, wellness coach, author, human movement specialist, and host of the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. This is an awesome podcast. Check it out, guys. We always love supporting other podcasters. So make sure to check out the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. He is leading the way in the intermittent fasting community as the author of the Simple Intermittent Fasting Journal, along with the creator of the Intermittent Fasting Certification course. I want to welcome to the show Brian Gryn. Brian.
Yeah, I'm here.
What's happening, man?
Not much. Thanks for having me on.
Dude, super excited to be able to dive into intermittent fasting. Yet before we get started, I am interested. How did you get into this world? Like, Emily and I have our stories, right? Emily had she had some gut issues that the doctors couldn't figure out, right? I was lost in the world, and then I started getting into the fitness realm. What was your story getting into this? What you're doing now?
So appreciate you having me on. And my story regarding getting into sort of the health and wellness realm is, something I was always interested. Probably in college, I started actually in high school, I started lifting and getting into just working out, and it just sort of grew through the years, and then started doing some training in a small studio outside the city of Chicago, and started to realize that nutrition was a big aspect to getting people healthy. A client of mine actually introduced me to fasting. She was like pre-diabetic, had a lot of high blood markers, and just her metabolic health wasn't great. And she started doing it on her own. She had some guidance from a holistic nutrition individual who had all her markers and made sure she did it right. But anyways, she had great results with fasting, and she started off slow, but then started doing some extended fast, and she got great results. And that sort of prompted me to learn more about fasting. I didn't know much about it, other than I know a lot of the major religions obviously use it. And so that sort of prompted me to start doing it for my own good, just to see, because as you get older, you got to sort of try to mix it up, and staying fit and metabolically healthy, it gets a little bit more difficult as you get older, I would say. And so, I just got into fasting myself, and that sort of prompted me to get, I had great results, and it came out with a journal and just like this Fat Burner Blueprint, which is a 6-month program, and it just sort of, just been building ever since. So I guess I would say a client of mine actually introduced me to fasting, and I just sort of took it from there.
And there must have been some really amazing changes for you to be able to go, ooh, wow, I really want that. I'm passionate about that. What were the big changes for you?
Well, for me, I've always, I guess, for the most part, been in decent health, and I think for me it was more like just another tool that I could use, and I found that it got my body back to like what it was like. Let's say I'm 41 right now. I started in my 30s with fasting, mid 30s, I'd say, and it got me back. Like turn back the clock, I felt like 5, 7 years. Both mentally and physically. And I was like, wow, this is a cool tool to have. And so it just prompted me to dive deeper into it. And yeah, that was it. So I guess the biggest thing for me was it helped bring my body back a bit, and also mentally, just more mental acuity, felt energized throughout the day, and just felt, I don't know, I guess can you fall in love with fasting or no?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. I'm not the only one.
Dude, yeah, 100%. Getting into fasting was one of the best things that I did for my body. And one of the things that I found out, Brian, is that I came from the world of being a CrossFit coach. High intensity, high training, heavy weights, right? Eat 6 meals a day, right? My body was so freaking inflamed. Then the pandemic came. Then I was working out at home with some dumbbells. So I'm like, well, do I really need to eat as much? No. Then I started researching fasting, intermittent fasting. And I started getting into it. Then I was, I'll just eat 2 times in a day. Oh, maybe I'll even try eating 1 time in a day. Then all of a sudden, my body just started sloughing off fat. It's just, I don't know if that's the right word. Emily, is that the right word? Sloughing?
I like it.
Okay, we're going to stick with it. It was sloughing off weight. And what I realized is, Brian, I only had to do 30-minute workouts. Like, I kept strength-based, 3 to 4 days a week, right? Dumbbell-based stuff. My body's never looked better. Never felt better. No aches, no pains, right? None of that stuff. Did you get those same type of
I actually,
feelings?
I was just going to say that story was similar to mine in the sense that once the pandemic hit, I just started training in my basement, and my workouts were shorter. But a couple of things changed for me. I used to be more of like a pescatarian, and then as I started my podcast and just researching more about the importance of animal protein for growth. I started implementing that back into my life. And so I think it was a combination of upping protein and these micro workouts, which just showed me that you can build muscle, and with fasting, you can build muscle by doing that. And like you said, you don't need to eat 6 times a day. I think I used to snack I think I lived off Kind bars for like a good couple of years.
Yes.
I think I had stomach aches. I remember having stomach aches from eating too many Kind bars. And
For sure.
yeah, so first and foremost, I think that eliminating snacking is a good step one if you've never done any type of fasting, and you can sort of build from there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things that we talk about in our program, right, and what we tout is metabolic flexibility. Do you use that word? Is that a word that you use, or do you stay with intermittent fasting? I'm curious with that.
That's a word that I think gets thrown around a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and probably has a few different definitions depending on who you talk to. But I think that, I think fasting can help you become more metabolically flexible, and it can be used as a tool, and it doesn't need to be used all the time. I think that's the beauty of it, is it's sort of this simplistic approach of you're either in a fed state or you're in a fasted state, and it takes the confusion. I think with every other diet coming out, every 2 weeks, a new diet, a new way of eating, and all this confusion around, should I be carnivore? Should I be keto? Should I just eat vegetables? And it's it can be confusing. I mean, I get confused sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in this, I'm sure you guys hear that too. You'll have on the podcast, right? You'll have one expert coming on, I can go through, saying one thing and then someone else saying another thing. But I think most importantly is you just have to self-experiment on yourself. And I know it's sort of cliche, but find find what works, what feels best for you. And that's the great thing about fasting is if it doesn't feel right, and it might not feel right, you're going to be uncomfortable, especially in the beginning a bit. But just like anything else, you can sort of get through that and just have it as a tool to become more metabolically flexible.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. There's going to be so much you guys are about to dive into. You just freaking buckle up. So we're talking about fasting. We're talking about metabolic flexibility. There's also a term out there too, right? Being fat adapted, right? How does somebody become fat adapted? Does fasting help with getting to a point of being fat adapted?
I would say yes. So in order to become fat adaptation, just as a definition, refers to your ability to convert fat to energy. So when you're fat adapted, you don't need, a steady stream of, let's say, carbs or glucose to power your day.
Yeah.
Instead, you can tap into your more abundant, for most people, energy supply, and that's body fat.
Yeah.
And so this like goes back to like the Paleolithic times, right? Our primal days where our ancestors didn't have access to food 24/7,
right?
And calories at some time were scarce, so their fat mass kept them alive. I actually just interviewed Dr. Richard Johnson, and he talks about how these animals are like literally like eating tons of fruit before they have to hibernate and for the winter. And the body fat is a tool of survival, and so yeah, as long as you have a sufficient amount of body fat, you can get into those stores. And the fastest and quickest way to get into those stores is to get your insulin levels down. And obviously, if you're not eating, that's one way of doing it.
Fat adapted. We got fat adapted. We got metabolic flexibility. We got intermittent fasting. These are all like levers, right? That we're talking about. Less in terms of like you have to be on this certain diet, because you could, like you were saying, we could be keto, we could be paleo, we could be Mediterranean, and still fast and still become fat adapted and still have metabolic flexibility, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. I think and then I might sound, but I'm not really like anti-carb. I think the big thing is you can have many different eating style, and fasting is just a way to compartmentalize your eating window and just give you structure. I think that humans in general do better with a little bit of structure. It's like anything. Why do we have routines? We have routines so we can, I'm big into like a morning routine, right? Well, why do we do morning routines? It's so we can we can have a successful day and feel productive. And, I think the same thing rings true with fasting. It just gives you some structure for the day. And if you know that you're eating within a window, not to say that you have to like rush and feel like you have to just stuff your face in that eating window, but it does give you, okay, I have this time, and then when I'm outside of it, I'm just not going to eat. And it might be challenging at first, but just like anything, fasting is a muscle, and you have to sort of work your way into it.
And it took me a while. I mean, it was to your point, and I'm going to be very interested in just the people that you work with. So to get to the point of me being fat adapted or metabolically flexible, or being able to intermittent fast and be able to have sustained energy throughout the day, I went from 6 meals to 3 meals. When I had 3 meals, they were high in protein, high in vegetables, right? I was able to sustain for 4 to 6 hours without eating. Then I started going like, man, what it came down to was like, I don't want to eat in the middle of the day. It takes up too much damn time, I'd rather be doing something else. So then I started doing breakfast and dinner. And even just eating breakfast and dinner, I started seeing some incredible results, right? which that doesn't actually fit into, the terms of intermittent fasting. This is more like I'm restricting my caloric intake, right? Or I have these, feeding windows. Yet I started seeing these really great results. And then after doing a 72-hour fast, I went, well, what if I followed this up with eating once a day? And I started eating once a day. And I did that for an extended period of time, 3 to 4 months. And some, it wasn't every single day, right? There's some days that I ate depending on what my body felt.
Mm-hmm.
But I started getting to this point where it's just like,
This is easy.
I'm freaking Superman here, right? Like, I get to the end of the day and I'm like, I still have energy. I'm still just cruising. I haven't lost muscle mass. I was at one point, I was like, oh man, maybe this isn't so good. So I tested my deadlift, and I deadlift 405, and so I really started getting to this point where I'm like, wait a second, do we really need to eat? Like, is this really a thing? Right? And that obviously that's a gross exaggeration. Yet, I tested my body also in a ultra marathon, 34 miles, and I didn't do any carbs during my race. I did nuts, avocados, bacon, so on and so forth, and ran the full 34 miles in that state. And I was able to have energy all the way through. The only thing that crushed me is my electrolytes were way off. And so, like, do you see, or what are the typical results that you see, and how long does it usually take for people if they're starting to go, I want to start using the lever of intermittent fasting? Because some people are just like, this is how I eat, and then I'm just going to start doing 16 to 18 hours. What's the protocol here? What do you usually see with the clients that you work with?
Yeah. So, like I was mentioning before, I think it's something that, especially if they're eating, let's just say they're eating the standard American diet and they've been snacking, I think you sort of want to do, personally, I like to take like one step at a time. And that step would be eliminate snacking would probably be a first step. And then essentially cleaning up, what they're eating is important as well, because when you're eating clean, whole foods, it just makes fasting that much easier. So you want to sort of set them up for success as opposed to just, there are some people who probably won't change what they eat and they just want to start fasting and implementing that. And I think that's fine for some people. But for most of my clients, I like to, clean up their eating. These could be small changes instead of having, instead of for breakfast, having a muffin and cereal, maybe we have eggs and avocado, right? Like healthy fats, protein, and that'll keep them more satiated throughout the day, which will allow them to eliminate snacking, which in turn, once they get into maybe a 16-8 window, they'll have success. And so I think that's a good place to start. And then, you can obviously tailor the fasting windows as they go, like almost like you mentioned you did. Perhaps if they plateau or if they just feel like they're stuck at a certain place. But I think those would be good starting steps to get into it.
And Brian, do you recommend doing the 16-8 every single day? Would you start off with 1 or 2 days a week? How do you ramp into that as well?
Yeah, so I do recommend, if you can, do the same thing every day. I think that goes back to like having structure and routine. I know there's some people who do 5-2 where they're like eat normal for 5 days and then fast for 2 days. I just find that that might be difficult for some people. They're used to eating a certain way, and then 2 days pop along and they have to fast or do one, maybe have one meal. Or so I would say yes, they don't have to do 16-8 right away. Let's say they do 12-12, and then they, the journal that I came out with, sort of what it teaches to do is push back that first meal gradually, and you can do that over a week or over 2 weeks until you get to, let's just say noon or 1 o'clock, and then you'll be used to it by then.
Yeah.
Now there's multiple different ways when it comes to fasting, right? Or let's actually put it this way. What's the difference between intermittent fasting, time restricted feeding? Like, where is where's the separation here, right? Because a lot of people throw like, oh yeah, I did a fast, right, and they didn't eat for 16 hours. Is that a fast? Or are we talking fasts or longer day periods of fasting?
I would say that, I mean, yeah, I would say extended fasts probably are fasts that are longer than a day. I
Mm-hmm.
would say if you want to say intermittent fasting would be where you're doing some type of, restricted eating window every day. And maybe when you talk about time restricted eating, then you talk about eating, there's obviously some research around eating earlier in the day or when the sun's out,
Mm-hmm.
and then closing your window at a certain time. So I would say maybe those would be some of the distinctions. And other people might think there might be different ones. Obviously, there's many ways to do it, but that's what I would say. So yeah.
And would you suggest and do you suggest with your clients, right? If you're getting them to the point of like the intermittent fasting, which is less than 24 hours, do you push them into longer fasts and say like, hey, do you want to try a 48, a 72? How far do people go out? Can people do 5 days or 7 day fasts? Is that healthy?
Yeah, so I don't do a lot of extended fasts with my clients. I know, like I've had, Jason Fung and on the podcast, and he has the fasting method, and
Right.
they they do a lot of extended fasts with their clients. They're monitoring their blood and things like that, and their insulin levels. And I think there's a time and place if you really need healing, and I know there's like this clinic out of Germany, and I watched some of their stuff online a little bit, and they do extended fasts where people come to their facility and they're monitored and stuff like that. So I think if you're being monitored and you really need to heal from something, I actually got interviewed from a woman. God, what was her name? And I was on her podcast. She did a 30-day fast.
Whoa.
Really, yeah. I was like blown away. I thought she said I like had to like her. I'm like, what'd you say? Was that? Did you say 30-day? I like made me seem like small. I'm like, oh God, that 2-day fast I just did
Yes. Yes.
doesn't seem like much. But I don't think for most people they need to do more if they want to do an extended fast. A 2 to 3 day fast I think is probably plenty. I think a lot of people talk about like cell cleansing, and I think that, those little bit longer fasts can help with that autophagy, right? But again, going back to your question, I don't have a lot of my clients do extended fasts. I typically have, and a lot of them are male. I typically get them into eating 2 meals a day, and doing a 16/8.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, as we go, then we can go, maybe we shorten that window a little bit more depending on their goals and where they're at.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So,
And when it comes to fasting, and you get them to the point where they're doing 16, 18, you're talking about like different schedules. What about exercise? Yeah, it sounds like you have a ton of different types of clients. Maybe some people that like to lift weights, other people that want to do more aerobic training. How do you balance that? Because I'm very intrigued, because a lot of times I'm just like, cool, how far can my body go? Like 20 mile run, no food. All right, let's go. 34-mile run, no food. Okay, cool, let's go. What is the possibility of that? So when it comes to fasting and exercise, what's your take?
well, they're both stressors on the body, right? And so I think that you don't want to overdo either one of them, right? I don't. We talked about micro workouts already. I'm a big believer in that. So a lot of my clients, I'll get them into a routine where they're doing it, I would say 3 to 4 times a week, but maybe a 20 to 30 minute workout. Um, and mainly we focus on building muscle and overall strength,
Mm-hmm.
because as you get older, that's really important. So that's first and foremost. So we do have like I call it like an activity upgrade, right? Get them doing if their body weight or perhaps resistant bands. I like using the X3 from time to time, and that's variable resistance. So and fasting's a stressor. So I think you just have to keep an eye on it. I will say, like for me, this is not for everybody, but I remember when I first got into fasting, like I actually almost felt like I got too skinny a little bit.
Mm.
I'm a leaner body type as it is, and I had to watch myself. So you do want to keep an eye on that. And a lot of times I'll have my clients do DEXA scans so we know where we're starting from, what the baseline is, and then okay, we know what body fat percent they have, lean mass, things like that, and then we can build the program around that.
As far as timing, excuse me, Joel.
Go ahead.
As far as timing goes, we get a lot of clients who tend to work out in the morning and then they might not eat though until the evening. Do you have a recommendation for your clients on the timing of where they place their workout in relation to when they're eating?
No, no. Actually, I just did a small micro podcast on that, meaning the window of time as far as when they get their nutrients in doesn't really matter as much. I think in the past, and I think a lot of marketing and supplement companies wanted you to think that there was this anabolic window right after you work out that you should just start ingesting food or a shake, right? But that there's studies showing that like you have like a 2 day window, I believe. So I think whenever it works for your schedule is most important because then you'll stay with it consistently. So I've changed my workout times throughout the years. I used to be more of a morning workouter, then I was like late afternoon. Now I'm like right in the middle of the day. So I really don't think there's a right or wrong. I think it just what works best and when you feel you're most energized.
Yeah, I like that. What works for your schedule and if you, especially when you're first starting out, I find a lot of people it might be tougher to have that workout in the morning and then wait to eat later. So if you're used to eating, especially after your workout, so maybe start with moving your workout around that meal and then slowly move it away if that works for your schedule.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I move mine because a lot of times I'll be fasted. I'll do a fasted workout at like let's just say 1 o'clock or 1, 2 o'clock, and then I'll just eat after and just break
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
break my
That's how I
fast
like to do
after, and
it.
then
Yeah.
yeah, we're on the
Mm.
same page.
See, that's so interesting because I work out in the morning, right? And so there'll be times where I'm not breaking my fast until the evening. It might be lunch. It might be as late as like 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, and that was always a concern for me. I'm like, man, am I getting enough protein? Like,
Yeah.
am I gonna lose all this muscle? Yet again, like looking at all the different strength tests that I came back to, and I haven't done a DEXA scan. I haven't really tested that. I have an in-body scan that I haven't gone back to in a while. Yet just looking at myself, feeling the strength, I'm like, I don't feel like I've lost, much muscle mass. So, I mean, is there weight behind that of like, hey, you got to get X amount of protein? I mean, can you build muscle mass while intermittent fasting?
Yeah, you can. I mean, you like you've talked about it. I mean, I do DEXA scans probably every 6 months, and I have put on muscle mass throughout, let's just say, the last few years since like COVID. And so I've done that with fasting and micro workouts, and I think what helped too was increasing protein. I probably don't even,
Mhm.
I think that's the biggest thing that can be a little bit difficult, especially if you really are in a growth phase, is
Mhm.
getting in enough protein. So it's tough to have so much in one meal. That's why I try to have two solid meals.
Mm-hmm.
You'll hear people say like ideally for muscle protein synthesis that you should really spike it like 3 times a day. But you can have an eating window of let's just say 6 hours, and you could technically get in 3 meals there. And if you're not feeling like you're getting enough protein in, so it can be difficult. Yeah, it can be a challenging thing, and I think it just goes back to like what results are you getting, and how are you feeling? Because you could throw all the studies out the window, and if it's working, and like
Mm-hmm.
for myself, I've been gaining muscle. Maybe I'm leaving a little bit on the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of gaining, 5% uh, muscle, if I would have had 3 meals during that time period, maybe I would have gained 7%. But it's not like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, but I'm not training for anything. Perhaps if I was training in maybe a natural bodybuilder, I would maybe then focus more on maybe having a little bit more protein and having 3 meals.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's the feeling that I've had through it. I mean, even doing one meal a day and being on, doing OMAD, uh, it, I just really have wanted to test my body. Like I come back and I go, well, how much? Like how much stress is? And there's definitely been times, right, that too much stress, too much stress. And I'm curious. Do you have? What's your take on one meal a day? And whether that's too much stress on the body, whether that can be helpful, whether people can do it. Should they eat one meal, one big meal? Should they do a 2 hour window of eating multiple meals? What's your take on the one meal a day?
yeah, I mean, I think for most people, for sustainability purposes, I think 2 meals is what I would say ideal, especially with a lot of the clients that I work with. Um, but hey, what's to say that it doesn't work? Like you mentioned, I mean, like it worked. It worked for you for a while, So I would say give it a try if it's something that you've never done. You want to try. I'll have times where I'll just have one meal, or I might even have just like a little bit of a protein shake. Um, like midway through the day, and that just to sort of have a little, that way I don't
Mm-hmm.
feel like I need to have that one meal and like fit it all in.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you just got to be careful if you are sort of in a growth phase and you're just having one meal, then you're going to feel like you're just like, and honestly, and I don't know how you feel, but when I do one meal a day, you get full quick. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, how much can you eat in that one meal? I mean, so yes, I think it can work. I think it depends on the person, but as you get older too, you don't absorb protein as much as you do when you're younger. So I think for most middle-aged, let's say 40, 50 plus males who are, looking to maintain or even grow a little bit with their muscle strength and their strength, I would say that 2 meals would probably be a good place to go from. And if it's not working for you, you can always try one. But yeah, so I guess that's my take on it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I've been in my own, experiment. Like that's why there's not too many people that I know. I mean, most people who were runners were like, "You're the dumbest person I know." Running an ultra marathon with not 1,000 goos in your pocket, and so on and so forth. And listen, guys, if you're listening, I don't suggest anybody do that. Like I'm not backing at that, saying like you should do it. Yet I took a very long, extensive training period of working without food or with just fats and proteins in my runs. I didn't just shotgun it and just go let's roll. Yet to be honest, Brian, I was pretty damn surprised, right? That my body was able to be fat adaptive, metabolic flexible, whatever you want to say it, to be able to produce like that. How beneficial is intermittent fasting or being fat adaptive or metabolically flexible for performance?
Um,
Or is it?
I think for me, having the mental clarity going into a workout is a big deal. Like I'll do a pre-workout drink, maybe nothing crazy, a clean one with some caffeine, and I feel good. Um, as far as performance, some people feel like they need to have a little bit of a carb load maybe because probably they're used to it. And I would say that, you talk about working out in a fast state. I think before you do that, perhaps you should be in a low insulin state and get used to that for like, say, 2 to 3 weeks. And once you get to that point, then you can try your fasted workouts. I think if you've never done it, you're used to having a yogurt and banana beforehand, that's fine. But, so there can be advantages, right? We can use our own fat stores when we're working out, and but on the other hand, if you're not used to it, then you can sort of bonk and probably not do so well. So I think it's something that you should ease into. And I've done both. I'll experiment and have a little something, and then work out 2 hours later. And like you, I didn't see that big of a change in my performance. So.
Mm-hmm. 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 Coach Emily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. A lot of people, I think it's habit of having that food before, and how fat adapted they are. How long have they been practicing this for? Yet something that we help our clients with is and you talk about this a lot, is how do you make it easier to get into that fasted state? And one of the tools we use is electrolytes. So I'm curious if that's something that you use, if you have a certain amount or type, and how you utilize that.
Yeah, so it's interesting you bring this up, because I had Barton Scott. He owns a company called Upgraded Formulas. It's a hair and mineral test. And I just got my results about a few weeks ago, and then I had a little consult with them. And my results were, I was a little bit low. I actually have them right here. I was a little bit low in potassium and sodium. And so, especially if you're sort of a low carb, if you're low carb and you're fasting, you're excreting these things. And I do sauna, and sometimes hot yoga, so I'm sweating. So yeah, so these are, I got to sort of keep an eye on that stuff. And yeah, so I gotta, and I salt all my foods, but he's like, start measuring it out and seeing where you're at. So actually this morning I took 2 teaspoons of Redmond real salt, put it in a cup. Yeah, and I haven't used it all yet, so I'm gonna have dinner after this, and hopefully I'll just dump it all over and ruin my steak. So I can use, have my sodium intake. So yeah, I definitely think it's something you want to keep an eye on it, and like I have, what's this, Liquid Death? Not that they're like a sponsor, but they have sparkling water, and there's some mineral contents in that, but. Yeah, I think that's so important, and a lot of times people think they're hungry, but they're really just probably a bit, dehydrated, or their electrolytes are low.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. That's definitely the exact thing that we do with our clients, is the 2 teaspoon test. Like, have that out during the day, go through that, and then see how you feel after that amount. That's usually equated to about 5,000 milligrams of sodium. Which is something we recommend as a starting point, and see how you feel.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing, and I'm realizing I probably, as much as I think I use salt a lot, when you're only eating 1 or 2 meals, it's you're not
it's harder
getting.
to get it in.
Yeah, I do sometimes use that LMNT, Rob Wolf's company, where I put that in my drinks from time, so I have that from time to time. But yeah, it's something you really want to keep an eye on, and yeah, this hair and mineral test really sort of woke me up to that.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yeah, I've found, for me, I do 2 minimum element packets a day, if not 3 and possibly 4. And that helps me tremendously throughout my day. Yeah. And when I'm getting...
you have the raw one, or are you doing the flavored?
I do the chocolate all day long, every day. Yeah, so.
You know what? I'll tell you, I have a special... What do you put the chocolate with? I'm curious, because that's what I use when I use it.
Yeah, so in the morning I do it with MCT oil, and then the next I'll do it with some collagen. So then I do collagen in my second 32 ounces, and then my third one when I'm here at the office is just with Element by itself.
But I've done it with a little bit of coconut milk in water.
Yeah.
Nice. I like to do it. I'll do a little bit of cold brew. I'll put a little bit of MCT oil in there. Then I'll just do the rest water and ice, and then put the Element in there.
That sounds
And a
great.
chocolate omelet. Yeah. Yeah, that's a nice one. I like that.
Have not tried that yet.
Oh yeah, give that
Yes.
a go.
Thanks for the tip.
Give that a go. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yes. Yes. Um,
Mhm.
Brian and Emily, feel free to tap in on this. Is when it comes to fasting for women, a majority of your clients men? Do you suggest women to fast? What's your take there?
Staying away. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm staying away. Yeah, I would say majority of my clients are men. And with women, sure, women can fast. I think who did I have? Megan Ramos, and she works with women a lot through fasting. And actually, the woman, the person that introduced me to fasting was a woman, and she was doing extended fast. I think I'm not. I will say I'm not like an expert on this. I know there's ways to do it around your cycle and this and that, and obviously they have a little bit more going on as far as hormonally. Um, but yeah, they can definitely fast, and just like men, I think they have to ease themselves into it, and just find what sort of fits for them. But that's as far as I'm going to go with that.
Yeah. It's like you said, though, with the hormetic stressors, to me, the way I look at it is women have an extra hormetic stressor they have to look at. So if you're having all these stressors, fasting might be tipping that cup for you. So paying attention to that, like you said, with the timing of the cycle and how you're feeling, where your hormones are at. If you have any issues with your cycle, there's definitely a time and place for it. Yet I'd agree with you overall. It can definitely be a tool for women. It's just a matter of how is your sleep? How is your cycle going? All the things, right? Taking everything into consideration.
Yeah, totally agree. And obviously, if you're in a growth stage, which would be pregnancy or
Exactly. Yeah.
breastfeeding and things like that, or if you're chronically stressed, if you don't sleep well, and if you have a history of like disordered eating, fasting
Mhm.
is definitely not going to be. I don't advise.
Right. Yeah. Totally agree.
And one thing my multiple things, but one of the things that I'm really interested because you do work with men, and I'm sure you have a lot of hard charging men. Do you ever find guys who overdo it? Right? They're already living like a stressful job. They got kids. They're CEOs. Like and they're just like, well, shoot. I mean, if 12 hours is good, how about 16? And if 16 is good, how about 18? If 18 is good, like, do you run
Like
into
Joel.
that? Yeah, yeah. Like, man, if I could, I won't eat ever, and I'm gonna go run across the world, and like I'll be fine until I'm like dead.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think I have run into that a little bit because a lot of times people think more is better, and
Right.
it's not necessarily true.
Mm-hmm.
So you just have to sort of talk them out of that. Because like we talked about, it is a stressor, and you got to have everything else in check, your sleep and your stress and things like that, before you start going crazy with fasting. And again, it's a tool, and it's something that you don't want to overdo, just like any of these other stressors we've talked about. So
And what would be the signs? Like, say somebody's starting to do fasting, they don't have a coach like you. What could be the
yeah.
signs that they're overdoing it, that it's not working well for them?
Yeah, I mean, some people can maybe start even putting on weight. Perhaps the body will start hanging on to fat, and or they can have too much. Right? They could be sort of getting underweight a little bit and just looking like they're sick. Um, and also maybe if they're not recovering well from their workouts, those are all signs. And obviously, slowing down the thyroid and maybe even some hair loss, things like that. So there are some signs, and um, you want to sort of ease your way into it and sort of find. It's like anything else. You want to sort of find that sort of window that works well and into your lifestyle. And if you're traveling a lot too, I have men who are traveling a lot. It's a good tool to use for travel because not that they give you any food on planes anymore. They give you like cookies and nuts, and but unless you're sitting first, which I know you guys do.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's it. We have our own plane
Right,
actually.
yeah, oh, okay.
Yeah,
So yeah, if you have your own plane, then
yeah, it's easy.
right, right. But if you don't have your own plane, I actually like using fasting as a tool when you're traveling. I mean, see, if you're traveling every week or every other day, you got to not do that. But like if I have a travel day, I'll probably do a longer fast. So I don't know. Yeah.
Nice. Coach Emily, any other questions you have for Brian before we wrap this up?
Yeah, my last question would be, in addition to the electrolytes maybe helping out when you're starting fasting or extending that period for the first time, what are your other tips for helping with that? You mentioned a little bit about adding protein and fat. Anything more on that?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, there's a lot of different tools and tips you can use. I think that having a coach guide you or using like a journal just to record, what you've been doing, and as you ramp up into fasting. But yeah, like I mentioned, eating clean really helps, prioritizing protein and healthy fats. Little tips like I like to use like sparkling water. I think is great. Hunger waves come and go, right? So you got to sort of ride it out sometimes. And drinking sparkling water, even some black coffee, and like you mentioned, I guess a lot of people will say, well, what's a clean fast? I mean, if you have these like fasting training wheels that you can use. So if you want to have some black coffee, even with a little bit of like a cream or like an MCT oil, that'll help get you through times when you need it. So I would say those are good places to start. Like we talked about electrolytes and eating clean. I think those all, and also I almost forgot, is if you're starting fasting, find a time when you're busy to do it. Like not when you're like sitting staring at the kitchen, right?
Yes.
Am I right, Joel?
Yeah.
Oh man,
Right?
It's so interesting because my brother, he was the one that first started off doing fasting, and one of the things that we have recognized is since the pandemic, he's worked at home. Well, he'll struggle at times to get to his 16 or 18 hours because he's like, dude, the kitchen's right there. It's literally right behind me. Where I'm like, I leave, I go to the office, and there's times where it's just like, oh yeah, I'm good. I only had one meal a day. And that's because I've just been on doop, 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 doop. I had my LMNT, I had my black coffee. I'm busy throughout the day, so it's like, and then I get home and I'm like, oh, okay, cool, I'll eat now. So that is a for sure when it's there.
Yeah, I just was talking to a client today. He's going to try a 24-hour fast for the first time just to see. And a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, I'll do it on like a Sunday because, I have time to prepare. I'm like, well, you might want to rethink that. Do it on a day that you have stuff lined up to keep you busy.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing I would say.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Agreed.
Awesome. Well, Brian, we really appreciate you being on the show and being able to share all this knowledge with us. If people are interested and they want to learn more about what you do, your journal, right, your podcast, how do people get a hold of you? How do they work with you?
Yeah, I would say the easiest place is just go to briangryn.com. And it's all there. They can reach out. We could do a 15-minute call and just discuss what would be a good tool for them because I have a few different tools that they can use to get started. And yeah, the podcast is on my website too, just like you guys have. And it's all there.
That's awesome. Yeah. Emily, anything else?
Yeah, if you could pick 3 simple tools to start getting either more fat adapted or fasting, 3 simple things we talked about today, what would you narrow them down to?
Okay, so 3 simple things to get fat adapted and into fasting. Can I repeat stuff I said already or no?
Exactly. Yeah. What would be the top 3?
Yeah, repetition for sure.
Well, eliminate snacking, eat whole foods, and just push back your first meal 1 hour gradually until you get to the window that you're looking for.
Perfect.
that is a 1, 2, 3 step.
Golden.
That's golden right there, you guys. If that
Simple.
didn't sell you, simple and easy are not the same thing. And Brian gave it to you guys right there. And if you guys want to work with Brian, head over to his website, briangryn.com. Check him out. We love having great guests who are super knowledgeable. And Brian, you fit the bill there, man. And we really appreciate you being on the show.
Emily and Joel, thanks so much for having me on. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, you're absolutely welcome. All right, you guys, that is it. Episode 67 in the books. We'll see you next week. Episode 68. And I actually don't remember what we're going to be talking about. But you
Common myths.
Oh wait, we have a listener coming in.
We had one listener coming.
No, they
Hey,
just
guys,
chimed in.
hey, oh yes, they did. They did give the little hearts. Well, hey, whoever that is, because I can't see who you are. Thanks for chiming in. Thanks for being
Thanks
here.
for the love.
Yeah, thanks for the love. All right, Brian. We'll see you next time. See you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.